Hello, this is JDM from the Inventables forum. I'm going to design a fidget spinner and also use a couple of the apps that allow you to do specific tasks in Easel. The apps they're like plugins, but they are specific tools as well. So rather than having a confusing menu across the top with a bunch of different options, you can just pull up an app, run your task, uh, and I'll show you some of the specifics to get in particular the Radial Array app to do exactly what you want it to, because it can be a little bit intimidating when you first go in there. So to start with, I'm going to establish the center hole of the fidget spinner, and I've got a number that I use for that, and that is 0.87. When you're doing your own spinner, I would definitely suggest that you measure your bearing, and find a piece of scrap material and just do a test pocket and press fit your bearing in there. See, you want it to press in pretty tight. You don't want it to be loose and then have to try to glue it in. It's best to get a nice tight fit, but depending on your machine, how dialed in it is, um, and even run out in your spindle, if you have some run out, that can uh, increase the size of the hole. Or if your bit is not quite the diameter as advertised, which is very common, that can cause that to not be as accurate as you want to be. So if you are concerned whether or not your bits are accurate, on the forums you can look through some of the tutorials that have been posted on checking for that. The process is very simple. You basically cut a slot and then measure the inside with some calipers, and that will give you an idea if your bit is close. It's better to do it that way, to actually cut a slot in the material and then measure, because if you have, say, like a two flute bit, it can be difficult to make sure that you're getting an accurate measurement across the diameter. So I'm going to use 0.87 for my center hole for where the bearing is going to be. And while I lay this out, I'm just going to leave everything as an outline. I'm also going to go in here and just bring the size of my bit down all the way right now, just for the sake of drawing, so my lines are small. The shape I'm going to align to my 0, 0 point. And then I think what I'll do here is I will go into my apps and my utilities and use the offsetter. I'm going to offset that by 1/8 of an inch, so 0.125, and import. Now you can see where it left this. My sizes are correct, but when you run these apps, a lot of them will generate new geometry and then place it on the material surface. So in this case, I'm going to get rid of my original and reorient this to 0, 0. In the past, I've found that I want to have a maximum diameter of 3 1/4. So I'm going to lay that out just as a guide. So anywhere 3, 3 1/8, 3 1/4. Of course, you're limited by the size of your hand and the length from the tip of your thumb to your ring finger, index finger, whatever you use to hold the spinner, that it will clear the inside of your hand. And then I'm going to zero that out. I did a quick sketch for what I would like to do for my design. And I'm going to focus on this vertical area first to establish, and then doing a radial array off of that. So I kind of decided I wanted to have like a sweeping shape, and then rather than having other bearings down on the ends, I wanted to just use some brass rod. And the reason for that is just to add some weight. I'm going to cut this out of Delrin, I believe, and just putting that extra weight out on the farthest edge helps it to spin better. I'm going to grab another circle here, and I think maybe start with about 1/2 inch to see what that looks like. So bear with me here, I'm kind of making this up as I go. And I'm going to zero that on the X. I tell you what, let's go. They did add recently, they added a fidget spinner app. Very easy to use. I'm going to bring that down to 1/8 inch. And just to use it as some reference. So when I import that, it does come in turned from the orientation that I want to work. So I can take that and rotate it. If I go plus just 90 plus, it will rotate counterclockwise. Remember, if I want to go clockwise, I have to put negative. So a negative 90 would tip it downwards. So I'm going to set that back up. I'll just take a look here, and it's right about the size I want it. Mine's slightly bigger, and I may just bring mine down just a little bit, but that looks pretty good. And I think I will just bring that down slightly. So in establishing this sweeping curve, I'm just going to do some subtractive operations to get that, and I'm going to use the circles just so I keep nice smooth arcs. Go ahead and set that to outline. I can come in later on and clean up with point editing later. I'm just going to get my basic shape here. I think I like that. I'm going to make another circle. A little bit smaller. I think that'll work. Hopefully that'll work and I won't have to redo it. I'm going to turn this into a cutting tool. Fill this one and then combine them to subtract. And then I want to have a little bit of an arc here just to kind of change this shape, so I'll need another circle. I'm going to allow that to break up that line a little bit. Right about there will be good. Again, I'm going to combine these two shapes. So I'm left with a little piece here that I definitely want to get rid of. And I'm going to bring this shape to the top just so I can kind of keep track of my orientation. Yeah, I think that'll have a nice flow. Now I'm just going to use my pen tool to basically block out some shapes to delete some of these parts. So it doesn't have to be precise at all. Just going to cover this guy up. And just to send it to the back. Okay, good. Okay. Now you notice when I select this shape, it's still, these two shapes are considered one object, so that is the purpose of making this other shape. So if I combine these, I will just delete that little piece that's sitting out there. Bring me back to my shape. And pen tool again, I'm just going to take this little chunk off of here. Fill it, zero it out, and combine. There. I think that'll work. I can make a shape to clip that corner off. I don't want that sharp edge, but I think I'll just try deleting my points and see what I get with that. I'm not sure I like that. And I don't. So I'm just going to undo, bring that back, and then I am going to clip that off. That's about where I want it. Oh, one of the things that happens when I navigate is in Chrome, using control on my menu bar up here actually changes the zoom on the browser itself. In Easel, there's a limit to how far you can zoom in. So once I hit that physical zoom of the application, sometimes I want to get a little bit further, so I'll just go up here and then continue to scroll in until I get the magnification that I need. Zero that out, bring it to the front, and then combine these two. I'm going to zero that back out, and then combine these two. So I'm happy with that. Remember, it will be relatively small once it's cut. So I do like that shape. We can array that, combine this. Little bit of an edge here. Just delete that point. Again, I got in my point mode by selecting my shape, and you can either hit the E key on your keyboard, you can hit the E over here on the menu, or you can double click on your shape. And so I just deleted a point to get that little jagged edge out of there. So I like that. Now when I do my array, I'll show you a little peculiar thing about the array. It's made to be super easy and super friendly, and it's also based on the bounding box of the shape. So if I have a square, our bounding box around the object has a mark in each corner, and then on the halfway point on the sides. And that goes for any shape. So even if I have a circle, it will still draw a bounding box. Now if that shape is not a perfect square, it will still work in a very similar way. I'll show you this in the Array app. It's where you pick your center of rotation is based on these points on the bounding box. So if I get an odd shape, let me just, for example, just combine these two shapes. Now, originally, let's say I wanted to array from this point on the box. But it's not, the Array app is not going to give me that option. It's going to want me to array it from along the bottom edge, either the corners or the very center. So before I merge these shapes, back up here. Before I merge the shape, I could have done my array. Now I can do this a number of different ways. I'm just going to show you the way that I like to do it so that I can see everything happen at once and it's interactive. What I do need to do is just make sure that the bottom of this shape is not below my 0, 0 line, and that will become obvious in a little bit, and it's not, it's fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some null shapes to center my shape and get a reference point back so that I can make this array. And then I'm also going to do a couple of other null objects to use as cutting tools. So if I get myself another circle here, zero that out. When I drag my box, I'll hold the Alt key, and so it'll scale from the center of the object. I just want it slightly bigger than my shape. And then I want another one. I can either draw another shape, scale it, or bring it up. I'm just going to use the Offsetter app and give that, well, let's just say half an inch. So again, you see how once it makes a new shape, it puts it back on the drawing board. I can get rid of this shape, select these two, and then zero them back out. I'm going to establish this as a cutting tool right now. I won't set it at 0, but I'm going to actually cut this one more time. I need to fill that, put it to 0. I'm going to bring that to the front right away so I don't cover it. My other shape, and combine them. Good, so that's pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this perfectly in half across my 0 line. Zero it out. And I do have to select the correct edge to get the result I'm looking for. So now I'm aligned perfect. The X left and right doesn't matter. I just want to use that to cut this ring in half. Good. So now if I select both these shapes, now you can see that I have a bounding box that is equal distance from my y-axis, but it is also the center of the bottom is perfect on my 0, 0. So when I go into my array application now, I can do a nice clean array on this. And in the utilities, my radial array, couple of settings, I'm just going to do 3. I don't need anything. I need 0 on my radius because I have my pivot point right at 0, 0. I'm going to orient the shapes. I do want them to rotate as they go around. And here, this is the part that might be a little tricky, but you can go in there and play with it. These are based on the bounding box. So if you look at your options here and you picture a line running up and down, so you have the top of the line, the bottom of the line, and then the middle of the line. That's what it's referring to. So in this case, I want my vertical anchor to be the bottom. On the horizontal, on the X, instead of being middle, it's going to have center. So I could either pick the bottom left and right corner, or I could pick the center. And in this case, I want the center. This option is not going to affect what I'm doing right now as it is with right. Sometimes, depending on your shape or if you choose a corner, you will have to change that. But I'm just going to change it just so I'm picking the right option and my shape is at the top. So the same thing is going to happen now when I bring this shape in. It is going to redraw it and put it up on my material. And now I'll show you why I made that ring around the outside. It was for the purpose of doing the array, but it is also for my alignment. If I had just done the array on my shapes that I'm keeping for my design, you can see that the bounding box that would be drawn around this would be a rectangle. So the center of that would not be the center of this design. It would be slightly higher up. So my outside ring is really just being used for alignment purposes. So I do not need this anymore. Something else that happens when you use the radial array application, when it redraws the shape, it brings them in as a new piece of geometry, but it also groups them together. So you can run Exploder on this if you want. I'm just going to get rid of all this all at one time. So if I select all these, sorry, I'm going to select all of these and combine them into one object. And because of the way I set it up, they are perfectly aligned, so you're not going to have any overlap at all. Now, any selection on that object, you can see I have a perfect square bounding box around it. I can get rid of this object. And now if I align this with my center point and my 0, 0, it's going to be perfectly aligned to my 0, 0 on my drawing space. I'm going to have to do one operation on this to clear this outside, but I'm going to leave that until the very end because I might want to do another array. I will have to cut out the hole for my 1/4 inch brass rod that I want to put in here for weights. Oh, I can go ahead and lay that out. I'm going to do a little bit different process on the array. once I do, instead of going through that process. So I'm going to put 0.24 on this. I'm going to leave it a little bit small, and I'll use a nice accurate drill bit later to clean that up. I'm going to go ahead and zero that on my X, and then I'll just kind of manually go in here and decide where I want that. I want to try to continue that sweeping curve as it goes through, so I want a little bit more on the top as it comes around. And I think that works. And I'll show you what I meant about the bounding box not being a square if I were to do this array with a 3. So my position, I need to make a little note here from when I go into the Radial Array app of where the center position is from the 0, 0 position. And I can see right here, this is the number I'm going to need in the Y. The center of this circle is this distance, it's 1.316 inches from the 0, 0. So I will need that number to plug in later. Let's run my radial array. I'm going to do 3 first. This is not going to give me something that I want to work with, but just to show you. And here's where I'm going to plug in that number that I just wrote down. So 1.316. For my vertical anchor, I want to pick the middle. And horizontal, I'm going to use the center. And here, this was important to change at this time because I had 3. And it's a circle, so the orientation, the orient is not going to matter. When I bring that in, I end up with correct spacing, but getting an accurate alignment without doing some other calculations based on how that's laid out is a little bit more difficult. So as you can see, I do not have a perfect square bounding box to do a 0, 0 of. It's not quite to the center. So this would be about the location I need. But you can see that the vertical, which would be the middle, is not going to help me to align that. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'll get rid of that. Select my shape again. This time when I do my array, I'm actually going to tell it to do 6. So I'll have a shape count of 6. My radius needs to be that number that I wrote down, 3.316. My vertical anchor is going to be the middle. Horizontal is going to be center. And top from my position. Now when I import this in as a new shape, I'm going to be able to use this center point to align this, and I can just delete the shapes I don't need. So bring all that in there, zero it out. And now I've got perfect alignment. And before I drop that on there, I'm going to get rid of this other shape, just so I'm not forgetting and leaving a shape nested underneath. So that looks good. I could have saved myself a little bit of extra work by putting the depth on those. These I just want to cut out. and the remaining 3 I can just delete. So I just use those for the purposes of alignment. I can select my shape and combine. Okay, this is almost where I want it to be. This middle circle is going to be the hole that I cut out for my center bearing. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that, set it to 0, and bring it to the front. And one little thing I want to check here. I would like to cut this with a 1/8 inch bit. I don't have to. There's no particular reason except for I always like to try to cut with the largest bit I can. So I'm just going to do a little check here on that space. And I can use my lock. I just never do it. So if this is the diameter of my bit that I'm going to use, I'm just kind of looking to see how far that's going to go in there when it cuts. And I think I'm okay if that comes down and just does a little divot in there just to break up that shape. In fact, I might just cut this with a 1/16 bit just so I get that breaking up that shape. So this combined with my center hole. And I am going to have to make a copy of that. So I can make another circle. And again, that size was 0.87. Zero that out. I'm going to set that depth to 0. Select my other shape, my main shape, and combine those to cut that hole out. So that is the hole for my bearing. This inner ring that I made, I'm going to combine it with my main shape. And that's the basic layout of my spinner. I'll have some weight in there. I think that'll look kind of cool. Now what I do need to do is get rid of this, and all I'm going to do is make an object to combine and cut that away, and that will be pretty much done. So I can use this circle that's in here, copy and paste and make another one, zero it out, and using the Alt key I'll uniformly scale from the center. This needs to be changed into a cutting tool and filled, and I'm going to bring it to the front. Fill that. Do a combine. So now this object is what I'm going to use to cut the other piece away. You can see that that is completely covering this ring. So all I need to do is bring that forward, set it to 0, and now select my main shape, which is connected to that black outer ring, and if I just combine, it's now gone, and I've got my finished spinner design. Just to be sure, in case I want to come back in and do any changes, I am going to make a copy of this file, rename it, just in case I decide I need to change something. Then I don't want to have to come back in and figure out my center, because again, I've got a situation with this shape where the bounding box is not centered. See my middle line across the middle of the bounding box, it's not centered. So this is good. My Y is good, or my X, I'm sorry. We'll close that out. And I'm going to set this up real quick to cut. Get rid of that. I don't want to forget that, to have my machine go down there and try to cut that. So this I'm just going to bring up in. Change that to an outline. So this is this big shape. I wanted this to just cut out anyways. I didn't want to do a circle cut and then have tabs. I'd rather let the machine take the extra time to perfectly cut that out clean, so I don't have to deal later with filing out tabs when I try to drop that bearing in the same way for the holes that I'm going to put the brass rod into. So I'm going to set up tabs on that. I just want 3. And I'll go about 06. With about an 06 height. Oh, a little bit big there. And we'll get this right. There we go. And my tabs, I like to always put my tabs on an outside edge that is really easy to clean up. If it's on the inside of a curve, it's just a little bit of extra effort, and it's so easy just to take a nail file or a small needle file and just take these outer edges off. So that's pretty much it for that design. I'm going to cut this tonight, and then I'll be posting it on the forums. So thank you. Again, I'm JDM on the inventables.com forums. Send me a message if you have a question or suggestion for any of these videos, or if you want me to demonstrate something for you. I can quickly jump on here and make a quick video. Thank you.